Trump's approach to international trade is like swinging a hammer. Instead of using precision, he will break more than fix. Good morning, I'm Montserrat, and I'm the introducer of the team that is in favor of the question, will Trump's presidency be detrimental for the world? My team is composed by Lucía Sanz doing R1, Gala Hernández doing R2, and Paula Castillo doing the conclusion. To begin, I would like to review some terms which are essential for the development of this debate. According to Oxford Language, trade deficit is the amount by which the cost of a country's imports exceeds the value of its exports. And recession is a period of time during temporary economic decline in which trade and industrial activity are reduced. Before saying my thesis, I would like to establish the frame. We defend that Trump's presidency will be totally detrimental for both the world and the United States. Donald Trump has risen to presidency with new policies which are totally detrimental and against three basic groups: the economy, human safety, and environmental safety, which ensure the growth of our planet. Our arguments are the following: recession and transgressive policies. I'll go over our arguments briefly. Our first argument is recession. One of the reasons of this recession is caused by the tariffs that has been implemented all over the world. According to BBVA research, the process of applying tariffs, although many of them are still in the process of being applied, have already begun to affect consumer and business confidence and to disrupt the dynamics of global supply chains. The increase in tariffs is a clear example of negative supply shock, making goods more expensive and reducing economic activity. This is going to directly impact not only nationally, but internationally. The second reason for this recession is related to America's businesses. According to Euronews, American companies are going to have less limitations in relation to AI, competition law, and taxes. This is going to make them innovate faster, making companies around the world lose ground, affecting their growth and their job creation. It could also affect by causing the dependence of companies all over the world to the US companies. And as well, even the translation of people to the US because of the lack of limitations, impacting directly to the economy worldwide. Our second argument is transgressive policies. One of the first policies that Trump has implemented was the exit of the World Health Organization. According to BBVA, this organization has managed to eradicate smallpox and polio from the planet, as well as to control cholera and to launch child vaccination campaigns. As well, according to Euronews, the United States invested 920.9 million euros. The loss of this investor can impact the ability of the World Health Organization to manage new epidemic outbreaks, which affects the whole world. In relation to scientific medical research, the key funding has been frozen and the research has been halted. This means that billions of years that were dedicated for medical research have been gone. Another policy announced by Trump was the exit of the Treaty of Paris. According to Human Rights Watch, he also wants to increase oil and gas production in the country, which is one of the main reasons of climate change right now, which impacts people all over the world. According to Yale Climate Connections, he also says that with his exit, there won't be financial commitments for lower-income countries to develop renewable energy infrastructures. As a reminder, our strong argumental line was formed of two arguments: recession and transgressive policies. Remember, we're letting Trump play with the hammer without restrictions. Thank you very much.
Good morning, my name is Sania Makeva, and I will be introducing today's debate going against the motion, answering the question whether Donald Trump's presidency will be harmful to the world. We absolutely believe that the answer to this question is no. To support our position, we'll be presenting three main arguments: inevitability, realignment, and accountability. Since World War II, America has become the global leader. This dominance happening not by design, but because the US was the strong man in the storm, with its industry still intact and economy booming, namely post-war rebuilding. However, entrusting such power to one nation has led to significant consequences. Now, moving on to our first argument, inevitability. Over the past 25 years, US foreign policy has steadily shifted away from global leader position. This was first seen in George Bush's campaign, who promised a humble foreign policy that would avoid his predecessor's mistake in overcommitting our military around the world. Yet post 9/11, this was not followed through. Obama too followed the same direction with his foreign policy, notably in cases like Libya, stating that America's role will be limited, that we would not be putting groups troops into Libya, and that they would transfer responsibility to their allies and partners. Furthermore, Trump's America's first stance also reflects this, with him pulling out of international agreement, imposing tariffs and limiting military aid according to NYSFPE. Biden followed this with his decision withdrawal from Afghanistan. In his current second term, Trump has continued the trend, and even though after these withdrawals from global affairs might seem detrimental, it actually reduces his ability to harm the world. While the US might have been the beneficial in its global dominance, this inevitable shift opens the door for a realignment, where countries can be accountable for their own actions. Now, moving on to our second argument, realignment. Whether it's through trade wars, cutting military support, or regularly hinting at annexing Greenland or Canada, Trump is a bully, pushing others down to raise himself up. Yet, we don't have to follow this act. Trump has indirectly provoked many democratic nations to forge new alliances and build a new world order, as evident through this Canadian article by The Walrus. With the US being a source of uncertainty, the need for global cooperation and for the stepping up of other countries has never been greater. An example being a new realignment of energy dependence, which can be seen in the Times article that displays the building of a new cable connecting Canada and the UK that will provide clean, sustainable energy. The project, ironically named NATO Oil, a jump towards Trump, signals the future of the energy market is bright without the US and under the new democratic world order. Imagine similar initiatives spreading worldwide, all thanks to the transition from a semi-autonomous country being everyone's only stability source into a new future where nations unite to solve the worldwide problems. Now, moving on to our third and last argument, accountability. For this new world order to succeed, countries must be prepared to take on greater individual responsibility and accountability. This pullback from the US provides countries with new opportunities to strengthen their independence across their military, security industry, and economic fields. Trump's withdrawal policies are not only reshaping alliances, but also forcing nations and existing alliances to take active responsibility for their own security, which will in effect offer significant benefits, like, for example, as proven by this document, by faster capital economically, as by reducing reliance on foreign goods and resources, nations can shield their economies from external shocks and market fluctuations, as seen during the 2008 financial crisis, thus enhancing stability and resilience. Moreover, no longer overshadowed by Trump's self-serving policies, more countries will gain prominence and greater say in international affairs, resulting in a more inclusive and fairer global system. To conclude, Trump's isolationist policies are part of an inevitable shift away from the US global dominance. This withdrawal has spurred a realignment as nations forge new alliances and pursue self-resilience, while also taking greater accountability for their own security and prosperity. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, I'm Lucia Sanz, and I'm the R1 in favor of Donald Trump's presidency being detrimental to the world. To break it down, during my speech, I will be refuting and taking down some of the opposing teams' arguments and ideas and developing our own strong argumentative line. Their first two arguments, inavailability and realignment. From what we could understand, these arguments were both talking about economy. Therefore, we are going to unite them. And we are responding by saying that this is simply not how the world works. We depend on international trade for economic growth, innovation, and global collaboration. High-income as well as low-income countries thrive on international trade. So why should we take such a useful tool away when we have been thriving with it? This argument also clashes with our own recession argument, which is directly based on the fact that tariffs create an economic recession in the world. I will explain how our argument wins this clash during the development of it. They also mentioned an accountability argument, saying that the policies that Trump has been implementing are affecting the world positively. However, this statement directly clashes with our own arguments of transgressive policies, in which we explain how exactly these actions are being completely detrimental to the world. I will now continue by naming and explaining our own strong line of arguments with the time I have left. Our argumental line is composed of two powerful arguments, a recession argument and a transgressive policies argument. Our first argument, recession. Trump is applying policies which are the definition of what it is to be detrimental to the world. According to the White House, Trump is implementing a 25% additional tariff on imports from Canada and Mexico, and a 10% additional tariffs on imports from China. He has also threatened to put tariffs in the European Union. And no, he hasn't yet implemented some of these tariffs, which might mean that he never will. However, the uncertainty that these tariffs may be implemented in the near future will have a negative impact on companies that could decide to put off investments. And by doing this, many countries' economies will sink, simply because Trump decided to vaguely throw a major threat. And you claim his presidency not to be detrimental. According to Euronews, American companies will face less limitations related to taxes, competition law, and AI compared to other countries. As a result, American companies will innovate much faster, therefore affecting other companies around the world by not letting them grow and affecting their job creation. In addition, it causes other countries to be dependent on American companies, directly impacting the economy worldwide. Moving on to our second argument of transgressive policies. Trump is openly known for having and implying transgressive policies which have proven to have a detrimental impact on the world. For example, the White House stated that the US was leaving the World Health Organization, an agency that connects nations to promote health and to keep the world safe, with the excuse that they were simply ineffective during the COVID crisis. And while that may be true, this action will only be more detrimental to the world, because by leaving this worldwide organization, it will lose all the money that the US has been donating. As you can see in the following graph by the World Health Organization, in 2024, the US is the largest donor of this organization with a big difference. So can we even begin to imagine what will happen if all this money is cut back from worldwide health? According to Johns Hopkins School of Public Health, the WHO is already struggling financially, and the US's withdrawal will likely lead to a loss of jobs, reduction of work, and less ability to do the functions that the WHO is in charge of. According to PubMed Central, the US government's retreats from international health partnerships and sustainable budget reductions poses a big threat to global health security. These national institutes of health have also stopped funding research initiatives and research, threatening international collaborations of infectious disease and surveillance. Additionally, the US has publicly stated their plans to leave other alliances and organizations. US Republican Senator Mike Lee stated on X that it was time to leave NATO and the UN. These organizations will not be able to survive without the support of one of its most powerful allies. According to the European Parliament, the US has officially withdrawn from the Paris Climate Agreement. To make matters worse, Trump declared during his election campaign that he does not believe in climate change. According to the New York Times, Trump has gutted federal climate efforts, rolled back regulations aimed at limiting pollution, and given a major boost to the fossil fuel industry. He is abandoning efforts to reduce global warming, even as the world has reached record levels of heat that scientists say is driven largely by the burning of fossil fuels. Moving on to my next point, reproductive care. According to the National Women's Law Center organization, Trump has reinstalled the global gag rule. a harmful policy that prohibits international non-governmental organizations from receiving information or services for legal abortion or to advocate any access of abortions to their own country, even if it's from their own funds. Which means that Trump's reproductive health modifications are indeed detrimental to the world, not just America. Because he is taking women's rights of knowing about their own health and care that they need away. Whether or not he did this for the good of his own country, it doesn't take away the fact that these actions are detrimental. Thank you.
Lo siento. Trump, by swinging the hammer, and although he might not want it, breaks the walls that separated the rest of the world. Hello, my name is JT, and I will be conducting my team's first refutation going against the motion. But first, I have noticed how there are some uncertainties in your team about how our line works and what it means. So let me clear it up for you. But first of all, I'd like to make a statement. I would like to congratulate the opposing team on 2 great speeches in which we wholeheartedly agree. Their arguments are only confirming why countries should move away from the US and an unpredictable president. The realignment that is our second argument and the basis of our line shines even clearer after your speech. Trump's tariffs, economical impact, and his pulling out of world organizations, for example, only make it more clear and only make it more obvious that a realignment is necessary and that US dependency has gotten to an end. So you are just looking at the short-term effects of him, ignoring the long-term consequences his isolationism has. Now, I'm going to directly refute some of your arguments. You talk about a global recession and how Trump, by imposing tariffs, will hurt the global economy. And will now, as we said, yes, we agree, this will happen in the short term. However, shouldn't we move away from that? Shouldn't countries distance themselves from harmful US policies? As we have already explained, this change was inevitable. The change in that the US is isolating himself and disimplicating himself. It's an inevitable change, and it will also be beneficial because this allows the US to have that much power and to have that much say in what the rest of the countries be. We should focus on a future based on international cooperation, not on the dominance of a single country. We can see how these alliances are being made as, for example, according to this article right here, Japan, South Korea, and China, 3 countries that have been historically enemies, are actually making alliances and are actually bonding together in order to stop the US from harming them. Your second argument was transgressive policies. Here you talked about how he's exiting organizations. Yes, again, we agree. He is exiting organizations, but by exiting organization, he's also losing his position of global leader, and he's also taking himself away from the position in which he can harm, and he has harmed, and the US has harmed other countries since a long, long time. For example, you talked about he pulled out of WHO. Now, again, you have said that he has been detrimental because he has, for example, denied the COVID-19 crisis. However, again, shouldn't this be why his isolation is going to be good for the world? We can have a new World Health Organization without people denying essential facts. I will move on to developing our own arguments. Our first argument was inevitability, and as my introduction has said, the US gradual shift towards isolationism was an inevitable change. President Trump is just the person to rip the band-aid that had to be taken away one day or the other. We can see this isolationism, as we have said and you have said, in many and many of his policies, but this is actually a good thing, because by isolating himself, he takes him and his countries a position in which they can harm other people away. So therefore, yes, while this might have initial shock, we can see how in the end we're going to have a new world and a new landscape in which countries do not depend on a hegemonic potency such as the US. And this will be better for the world, as we're going to explain in our second argument, realignment. We have already spoken on how Trump's isolationism and overall aggressiveness against the US traditional allies is making them cut ties with the US and create new alliances in order to create a new rules-based world order in which diplomacy and cooperation are key. This is a thing that is actively happening because of Trump and because of his policies. We gave the example of NATO, which was a cable that will connect Canada and the UK, and that will allow them to gain more energy independence from the US and through renewable energies. Renewable energies are also something you mentioned in your speech. Well, here you can see how, yes, while Trump is very pro-fossil fuels and very denying of climate change, we can see how he's actually causing the rest of the world to explore new alternatives and to explore renewable energy. This is a very beneficial thing for the world that the rest of the countries are actually getting together to solve problems. How can we see that this realignment is going to happen? Well, we can see this, for example, in countries like Canada. According to this survey by the government of Canada, 44% of the citizens of Canada want to join the EU. Now, while this may not be possible due to how the EU works, it actually shows that there's been a shift in public opinion and that people and governments are more and more implicated towards working together and towards stepping away from all of these harmful things caused by the US isolationist policies. Our third argument was accountability. And this actually goes really well with something you said in your first ref. You talked about how the investors in the US are taking very hard blows and how the economy in the US, which is not obviously the rest of the world, is taking hard hits. Well, this is not the case for the rest of the world. We can see how investors are actually going to other countries and are actually finding themselves investing in these new alliances that we have already mentioned and these new countries that are gaining power. We can see this in this graphic by Statista showing that the dark blue is the EU, light blue is the US, showing that the EU stock market is actually increasing by incredibly high rates compared to the US stock market. Thank you very much.
Trump's ideologies and world policies are like a worldwide earthquake, destabilizing the foundation of international cooperation and global peace. Good evening, my name is Galernae Zapata, and I am R2 in the team representing the position in favor of the question asked of us today. Our arguments are a recession argument and a transgressive policies argument. But first, I will start by refuting the other team's arguments. First, their argument of inevitability. This argument is very confusing and very contradictory because they are saying that other countries should move away from the US because he is hurting the world. They're saying that countries should distance themselves from harmful policies. And this just claims that it is Trump's policies that are harmful and detrimental to the world. They want international cooperation without the US. Why would we completely isolate a global power? We should be able to internationally cooperate with the United States, not completely isolate them. Not to mention that they also mentioned America First policy, which is also hurting America, which I will mention in my reconstruction of arguments. Their next argument was in alignment, about new alliances, world order, and trade war. As I mentioned before, he's isolating himself, which proves our point about causing more harm.
They also mentioned the trade war. See, the trade war was between China and the United States, but we're talking about world tariffs. We're not talking about two countries fighting over international trading between those two countries. And finally, their argument of accountability. Trump is ignoring his own responsibility. They're talking about accountability, taking the leader of a global superpower. Not everyone is a world power, but therefore they're still implying that everyone should take accountability except the United States. This is about global communication and about security. Donald Trump does not get to choose whether he implies himself in global problems or not. That is why his policies are detrimental, because he's isolating himself as taking no accountability. Therefore, their argument proves our point. Not to mention that if the US isolates himself, we're going to lose money, financial support, and a global leader. This is going to lead to a power vacuum that could be taken by an authoritarian regime, such as China. Now, to talk about how this is harming US too, they talked about how leaving WHO is just going to help others seek accountability. But leaving WHO isn't just about investments and helping other people have more money for health. This is about global cooperation and knowing what's happening in terms of outbreaks and helping manage response to health crisis. The US would be completely alone in terms of handling world health urgency. This limit to information will seriously affect the US. This isn't about money, it's about health and beating diseases, which the US cannot do if it cuts itself from global communication and information. Now I will, yes?
If the US is, as you said, harm these organizations, these health organizations, by being a little skeptical about global crises, how is it bad for the world that they are stepping out of these organizations?
No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying that Trump leaving the World Health Organization would mean that the US is disconnected from global health information, which affects America, as they would not be able to handle pandemic, crisis, or outbreaks. Now, to reconstruct our arguments. Our first argument was recession. We talked about tariffs, which they haven't been able to refute, as they just talked about how the trade war was positive, but we're not talking about tradings. We're not talking about trade wars between two countries. We're talking about worldwide tariffs. These tariffs are declining industrial production, reducing demand, and increasing spending, which creates a decline in real GDP. These tariffs are targeted toward certain countries, which include the entirety of the European Union, China, Japan, and etc. He has issued an executive order to impose 25% tariffs on all goods entering the US from any country that exports Venezuelan oil. We can also see how this causes economic instability, because the promise of these tariffs make countries take actions in their stakes and their goods, which complicates the economic market of exported goods. Not to mention that this will also lower jobs and lower consumer trust, which makes up 70% of economic activity. If the US enters a recession, there will be a contraction in international trading by the European Union, and the global stock markets will plummet and slow down economic growth. We also talked about deregulation and how Donald Trump's policies are giving extended benefits only to American companies, which will lower the competition and innovation. Our next argument, transgressive policies. This argument still stands, as they proved that we should all move away from his harmful policies. According to PubMed Central, the US government's retreat from international health partnerships and substantial budget reductions pose big threats to global health security. He has freezed a $50 billion industry, taken away contracts, grants, and medical research reviews. The National Institute of Health has also stopped funding research initiatives, threatening international collaboration between countries. Now, talking about climate change, a problem that Donald Trump does not believe is real. He has reversed environmental policies, withdrawn from the Paris Agreement, and has caused the deregulation of fossil fuel industries. Trump's rollbacks will increase US emissions by 1.8 gigatons cumulatively. He does not get to decide that global climate change is not his problem. He has annulled that intent to encourage a green energy transition, even after the Los Angeles wildfire in his own country. He points to eliminate energy efficiency standards and clean energy incentives, which would also increase emissions. In conclusion, Donald Trump's presidency is completely detrimental. Thank you.
Good afternoon, members of the jury and esteemed opponents. My name is María, and I will be conducting my team's second refutation, where we stand completely in opposition of the question proposed. Firstly, I'm going to start by briefly going through how this debate has gone so far. Now, the opposing team has brought us two main arguments, their first one being a recession argument, and their second one being about transgressive policies. In their first one, they mainly told us about tariffs and taxes, and in their second one, they told us about the exit of organizations, especially the Paris Agreement and climate change. Now, firstly, since our arguments are still not really clear to the opposing team, I'll explain them very briefly. Our first argument, inevitability, is about how for decades, the United States has been gradually stepping away from this role's world leader. So that was clearly not understood. And our second argument, realignment, is about how Trump's policies are not about isolation. They're about reshaping alliances to be fairer and more beneficial. Inadvertently, and instead of relying on America as a crutch, democratic nations are building stronger, more independent alliances that will make global security more balanced in the long run. And then our third argument, accountability, says that America has been the world's financial safety net, and nations are adapting, alliances are reconstructing, and accountability is spreading. Now, I will move on to refuting their first arguments about reception, where they told us about tariffs. Now, yes, the same arguments made by people who conventionally ignore the decades of economic exploitation that led to these trade wars in the first place. China was stealing intellectual property, forcing tech transfers, manipulating currency, and undercutting American manufacturing with unfair labor practices. The US was bleeding jobs and becoming dangerously dependent on geopolitical rival for everything from microchips to medical supplies, yet still generally doing better than most other countries long and short term. Trump's trade wars weren't about short-term gains. They were about forcing the world to step exploiting the American economy. Did it cause disruptions? Well, yes, of course. But that's what happens when you fix something that's been broken for decades. And guess what? Because even Biden kept most of Trump's tariffs in place because they were actually working, and proof that this dissociation isn't a Trump idea rather than a longer inevitable trend. Now, they also told us about tariffs, and tariffs have been painted as the ultimate villain of global trade. But let's set the record straight. Tariffs aren't some reckless economical gamble if done right. They're a strategic tool. Tariffs are simple taxes on imported goods designed to encourage domestic production. When a country imposes tariffs, it creates an incentive for businesses to invest in local manufacturing rather than relying on foreign imports. This isn't some radical new idea, it's a protectionism in action, a policy that has shaped economies throughout history. And in today's shifting global landscape, tariffs are more relevant than ever. Trump, unfortunately, does not understand tariffs, as evidenced by his implementation this past Wednesday. By implementing tariffs, the U.S. is not securing its own industrial base. It's forcing other nations to rethink their economic strategies. Now, countries that retaliate with their own tariffs will, in turn, invest more in their domestic production. Now, we have this piece of evidence that shows how Trump's most misunderstood policy, as his taxes, will actually be super, super, super beneficial in the long run. Now, in their second argument, where they have told us about the exit of organizations such as the Paris Agreement and climate change, I'll start by refuting climate change. Trump's energy policies are about realism, not fairy tales. While other countries pretend wind turbines alone will power entire economies, Trump made sure America had a strong, reliable energy sector that didn't leave people frozen in the dark. Now, here's the thing. Trump is thinking ahead. He is preparing for what comes after climate change actually hits. And that's why his main focus is on having a resistant economy. Now, plus there are already solutions to problems that may arise, such as my first refutation has already said, NATO-L. The North Atlantic Transmission One Link is a new infrastructure project that has begun to develop recently. Going with our arguments of realignment, countries are coming together to get solutions. Now, they have also told us about the Paris Agreement. And the Paris Agreement is often hailed as a groundbreaking commitment to fighting climate change. But let's be realistic, it's more symbolic than effective. It sets ambitious targets, sure, but it lacks real enforcement mechanisms. There's no strict penalties for nations that fail to meet their goals, which means it's more of a global PR move than an actual climate solution. Yes, your question?
What if a developing country doesn't have the resources to grow after tariffs?
Can you repeat it, sorry?
What if a developing country doesn't have the resources to grow its own?
Exactly. That's why alliances are coming together to support ones that are in bad situations that are relying on the U.S. The U.S. is isolating, which is something amazing because there are already projects of nations coming together to help the ones that need it most. Now, they keep saying in their argument that the U.S.'s isolation is something so big, but U.S. does not want to be included, so let them be isolated. Every major change will have short-term consequences, but the key here is to look long-term. We are in complete agreement, as we have stated with the other team. Trump's
isolating right now is probably the best thing that can happen. What we have to have in mind is that this is actually great. Now, let's tie back to the question on will Trump's presidency be harmful to the world? His presidency itself will most definitely not be harmful, stating the fact that this was most inevitable, as we have repeatedly proven. It has been an ongoing trend going on in the United States since Bush for more than 50 years. It is a forming realignment that is completely critical for our future, and we have proven evidence on how this is actually happened and will continue to happen. The world is better off with this shift. Accountability is spreading. So to answer the question proposed, yes, Trump's presidency is just what we need. Now, I would like to go off again on our three arguments: inevitability, realignment, and accountability, which create a perfect line to answer the question. Trump himself is not good. We are in complete agreement with the team. But what he is doing and the alliance that he is creating is. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Javier González, and concluding this debate against the motion. I would like to start with opponents' arguments, being: firstly, the opposing team has presented an argument about recession. They brought a series of facts of Trump's policies in economics. Again, continuing my team's argumentation line, we are not saying that Donald Trump is the great president. What we are stating is that the negative impact of his decisions pushed my team's ideas of the inevitable realignment. My refuters have said it. Countries are getting away from the USA, which is exactly this realignment, and it is not harmful to the world. Secondly, the team in favor has explained Trump's transgressive policies. They have presented that he has left the World Health Organization and the Paris Agreement, and are sure that this is a completely harmful decision. Trump has been harmful to this organization, as stated by my first refuter. With their argument, they are demonstrating that the realignment that my team has proposed is the best option for the world. Yes, realignment is the solution and is what is going to happen, as my whole team has defended during the debate. Now, I'll move on to our arguments. Our first argument was inevitability. Trump has been controversial because he has been doing the same thing that all the United States presidents have done the last 25 years, which is stop being, referring to my introducer, the strong man in the storm. The USA has been the pivot of society since the end of the Second World War, and it is normal that the new presidents want to end this tradition. This action is inevitable, and people are alarmed just because Trump is advancing on it, when again it is something that has been common for 25 years. When countries depend on yours, as my introducer said, you are exposed to failing and being harmful, but thanks to Donald Trump's isolationism, this is not going to happen. Our second argument was realignment, which is directly connected with the previous one. As we said before, the United States is isolating itself, and that is provoking responses from other countries. The rest of the world is making new alliances, like the example of the NATO putting the introduction of the European Union, Canada, and Australia united to end the war in Ukraine. Trump's decision to isolate is accelerating the realignment of the world. That is something that was going to happen at any moment. With this, it is proof that the world doesn't need the USA to be its leader and the country to depend on. Our third argument was accountability. It is commonly said that all big orders finally fall into place, and this is exactly what is happening right now. In the previous two arguments, we have shown that this is inevitable, but this isn't the only thing, because it has positive consequences for the world. Thanks to Trump's administration, small countries will be able to present their interests to the rest. Also, every existing alliance will be in charge of their own defense. The new world is a more stable one, in which every country counts and doesn't depend on a single one, the United States. How could someone believe that this is harmful? And finally, the most important aspect, my team agrees that Donald Trump is doing bad politics in economics and with his transgressive policies. Your arguments, the main difference is that my team is showing, added to our argument of inevitability, that the USA is isolating itself from the world. So yes, Trump isn't the best president, but the fact of being out on the world makes the realignment that we have explained, and in that way, a net positive balance. Thank you.
Rather than employing a precise approach, Trump's stance on international trade resembles a swinging hammer, causing more damage than making improvements. Good evening, I'm Paula Castillo, and I'm the conclusion of the team who is in favor of the question posed. Will Trump's presidency be detrimental for the world? To refresh your memory, I'm going to talk about how my team refuted the other team's arguments. First, they came with 3 arguments: inevitability, accountability, and accountability. To refute the first 2 arguments, my team said, like my Air One said, this is simply not how the world works. We depend on international trade for economic growth, and as we said, with this tool, low-income countries thrive. We also made a question that the opposing team couldn't answer. Why should we take such a useful tool away? The answer is that it is going to be detrimental. This argument also crashed with a recession argument, and we demonstrated why our argument wins the crash. Then for the third argument, we have talked about and stated that Trump's solutions for the inefficiency of some organizations that he's leaving are detrimental for the world. First of all, we have proven that leaving these organizations is not gonna work, and he is taking funds away even from investigations from his own country. And finally, we have proven how detrimental his policies for climate change are gonna be by pulling out from organizations and agreements like the Paris Agreement, and how he's removing protections that prevent, for example, oil drilling in deep oceans and stopping radical environmenting, which is only proven by conspiracy theories. As we said, he is being clearly detrimental for the world, and reasons like this. In summary, their arguments prove us right. Their policies are being detrimental for the world. So with all this said, their arguments are refuted. Now I'm going to make a summary of our arguments and explain why they're still standing. Our first argument was recession. This argument talked about how Trump's policies can be harmful to the global economy. We've done a thorough analysis of how these policies may be damaging for the economy if they're implemented, and how only the mere threat of them being implemented and how which can cause American companies or those based in the country to stop investing in the economy. Then our second argument was transgressive policies. This argument talked about how Trump's policies have had a detrimental impact on both the US and the rest of the world. In summary, our arguments have been strong, striking, and at the same time realistic. So with all our arguments, we have clearly proven that this is what Trump's doing. One single swing and everything can go down. Thank you.
Congratulations to both teams. It was such a great debate. Good luck, and we're gonna go.